X and Pete Tong billing them as the next big thing. The Arctic Monkeys sang about looking good on the dance floor, but you suspected they'd never been near one in their skinny-jeaned lives. Dance music had scurried away to lick its wounds in the dark corners of drum and bass, electro and techno. Or worse, it was just music that your mum liked. You go. So, it took another type of musician to make dance music relevant again. Indie kids dressed in neon, using guitars and synths and being labelled New Rave. Annie Mac, Klaxons, New Young Pony Club and Hadouken were sucked into this retro-modern scene.
If you speak to most people in the industry, they'll just agree that it was something made up to categorise a time, and I think people in a way wanted it to be bigger than what it was. They wanted it to be the new acid house, and they wanted it to, you know, represent a big movement. But I do genuinely believe that it did represent an important time, in that it represented when kids who liked indie felt like it was cool to go and be ravers again. It's a whole new generation of kids, so 13, 14-year-olds didn't know anything about rave culture. They don't know about acid house, they don't know about Shoom, they don't know about Ibiza, they don't care about Ibiza, they can't afford to go there, but they know about what bands they like through MySpace. And bands like Klaxons or Test Icicles before them opened them up to raving, but through a whole new perspective. And I guess from the people who were around the first time, or were aware of what happened the first time, it was exciting to see young kids coming through and blowing their whistles and wearing their fluoro.
It's quite funny when you're like playing pop music and people are acting like it's a rave and wearing neon clothes and we're wearing black. But that's exciting. I think it's incredible to see people dress up to come to shows. It's not, I mean, that kind of community in bands and music is always like the most exciting part about going to shows, so it's great and we welcome that.
It was an attempt to kind of pull together all these disparate kind of bands that were being something other than guitar bands, which is great. I think it was good to do that. I think NME essentially, you know, were the ones that really wanted to sort of try and focus on some of these other bands, because they could see this well-trodden path of indie guitar bands. It was getting stale. But, you know, they're all from very different backgrounds, different, they were doing different things, you know, Hot Chip, Cinnamon Mobile Disco, thrown in with CSS and Klaxons. I mean, they're just so different.
So it was basically something made up by some journalists?
Basically.
In a way, I think if people are going to call it New Rave, then I'd rather be with some interesting bands. There's other bands like Does It Offend You and Later the Pier that are really interesting bands doing different things. So if we're going to be categorised with them, then I'm happy.
I mean, I guess the easiest way to put it is we're a band, but with a big influence from British dance music.
New Rave was an in-joke, over before the NME could give away a glow stick, but it did prove that people always want to get out and party. How are you going to do that though, with mobile phones and MySpace spelling out directions to the latest underground event to your internet-savvy mum and dad? Things were certainly different back in 1988.
Alright, mate. So where is this place anyway?
Well, it's in a secret location. You just got to ring this number.
Right, and who's going to be there?
Well, I don't know.
So what's it all about then?
It's a rave day.
Nobody wrote about it, the media didn't write about it in general, till about what we're now celebrating 20 years ago, summer of '88. And I think what's happened, I would call it accelerated culture. I think what you've got is less time now for a subculture to develop. So you've got a kind of city of the instant. Something is on YouTube before you've actually invented it.
I would really love to believe that there could be something like that again, but it is quite hard to see how it would happen. If anything new comes up, companies, record companies, style companies, PR, all these people are associated with youth movement. It's been exposed and sort of exploited even before it's had a chance to develop.
It's more likely to happen in Finland or Estonia because they have less media and there's more of a chance of something interesting developing without lots of London-based journalists like me descending like vultures on a half-formed scene.
In a way, part of the appeal of those parties was the sheer difficulty of actually organising them. You're talking about a time when most people didn't have mobiles. pre-internet, trying to galvanise sufficient numbers of people through pirate radio broadcasts to meet somewhere, or meet somewhere as a decoy to the police and then drive off somewhere else. You know, those kind of things. People enjoyed probably the actual getting to the party almost as much as they enjoyed the party, because it was all part of a kind of great enterprise of devious behaviour by large percentage of the young population of the country. And whether that is still possible, I don't know, because I think in the internet age it's not possible really to keep anything hidden.
Is it necessary, I think, is more the question than is it possible. I mean, the thing is, then there was an underground club culture because most clubs closed at midnight or 1 in the morning. Now it's very hard for someone 18 to imagine a world where you couldn't dance all night, where you couldn't get a drink at 4 in the afternoon if you wanted one. But then all of those things were very firmly in place.
Ravers were one of the first groups to realise that a mobile could be used as an easy way of arranging to meet up with your friends. Now the mobile companies own big outdoor music parties. How on earth did we get along without them? We used to meet up in person and not online. We used to dance without fear of dad's dance recriminations. But just because we're grown-ups, does that mean we have to give up on music and technology entirely? Judge Jules knows a thing or two about keeping up with the kids. And does it offend you, yeah, a part of a generation who minded the gap?
The generation gap as such doesn't exist anymore. You're very likely in dance clubs to see an 18-year-old and his or her dad quite comfortably dancing alongside one another. You only need to look at the age spectrum of music buyers to realise that there is no longer a scenario where the generation gap is defined by you being appalled by what your parents are into.
There's some kids out there that see dance music as their parents' music, so there is a gap there, but my dad was just very liberal.
My dad used to, when I used to run a sound system, he used to help me out, like hiring generators on his credit card and dropping me off in the middle of nowhere with massive speakers, and he's always been really helpful in just trying to get me involved in at least something.
We look quite a lot at what customers want, and obviously, you know, no one customer is the same, but there's all sorts of groupings of the sort of things that people want, and generally running across all of them is a love of music right from an early age right the way through. It's something that really cuts across all of our customers.
Matt from O2, a mobile phone company that also runs some of the biggest arena and outdoor music events. Kids today have power as consumers, and big business knows how to harness the power of music to keep all their customers happy. The only trouble is, if we're all listening to the same music on the same gadgets, aren't we in danger of losing that secret sense of ownership that music inspires? That feeling that this is mine and it doesn't belong to anyone else? Where will the next generation of music junkies and DJs come from if we're all plugged in and online and supplied all the time? Does this offend you, yeah? Mixed dance music with punk. If the next big thing is about anything, it seems it will be a hybrid.
If you're a goth in the 80s, you could probably only read goth magazines and only listen to goth bands. But now with the internet and the fact that people are more eclectic, you're not going to be part of one particular scene. You're always going to be exposed to other music.
People of 18 to 25 who I teach, they're interested in all sorts of diverse musics. On their iPod, they've got something from 50 years ago, something from 1978, something from 1988. We've actually reached a stage which is you can just play something as if it's never existed before. There's no history to it.
But with all these broad tastes, will they find anyone like-minded to start the party with? Old Rave had the Hacienda, Clink Street, Hume, Spectrum and Ibiza, but not everybody could get to the clubs, let alone get in. Maybe with more music to choose from and an entire globe to befriend, the revolution is not as far away as we might think.
In the way that Acid House before, you'd have to go and pick up a phone and ring a certain number and find out where the party was. The exact same things happen now. It's just digital, so go to a certain website and put in a certain code and then you'll find the address, or maybe it's like mobile phone text bulletins, those kind of things, but it's still the same things happen. And I think kids are absolutely 100% able to form a band, get their band heard by the right people and potentially go on to sell records and become successful. I think they're a little bit clever than people think, and sometimes it's a bit embarrassing watching 40-year-olds trying to market to little kids. It's just, oh, stop.
Back in those days you would meet up with great people and you'd only see them at the club, whereas now those networks can be deepened. So for me, when I go and DJ